everybody, and welcome to the Black Minds Matter panel. My name is Vashti, and I just want to send a warm welcome to you and thank you for actually joining us this morning. We have an amazing panel. I'd like to extend thanks to the CEO, Betsy Basis, and the NHS executive team. I'd also like to thank Melissa Thermidor and Zishan Ashgar for this opportunity. And I'm going to introduce my panel now. So first of all, good morning, everybody. How are you doing?
Good morning.
Good.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm a lot more energetic than that. Good morning, everyone. I know it's a little bit earlier than what we would, or maybe me, what I would usually be doing this morning. But I just want to extend a warm welcome to you and thank you for being here with me today. Now, I've got my notes on everything that everybody has been doing because you guys have been so amazing, especially over the last couple of weeks. I know that I've interacted with you guys in different ways, and so I've seen some of the things that you guys have done, but I'm going to read out some things just so that I don't get anything misconstrued. And just to introduce who I am, my name is Vashti-iona Beckford. I'm an events and outreach officer for NHS BT. So I help people to increase blood donation in the Black community for things like sickle cell, and I'm also a sickle cell advocate. So I'm going to go to Adjani first of all, because Adjani looks like the most awake person here. So Adjani, hailing from Jamaica, he's an award-winning writer-director who only writes what he likes. He's an avid reader with a BSc in architecture and MA in film, and he brings a unique perspective to filmmaking. His latest project, Dreaming Whilst Black, which I have seen and I am a big fan of, and you know how much I love Dreaming Whilst Black, it brings a unique perspective to filmmaking. It was the second highest ranked web series in the world in 2019, with 36 awards from film festivals globally. And he's since written on a series for Netflix, Dave, and has 3 TV shows in active development. Wow, welcome, Adjani. A CV.
Is that like a bio?
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I'm going to move over to Priscilla and Michael. Welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today. So Priscilla is a Ugandan and British model and presenter who recently won the nation's hearts when appearing on the reality TV show Love Island Season 6. Whilst off the island, the model has graced the cover of magazines on multiple occasions and is no stranger to the screen. Whether it be in a music video or movies, Before appearing on the show, she worked as an operations manager for Africa's biggest music hub, Empower Africa, which was founded by Mr. Easy. And she ran programs that helped bridge the gap between Africa's rising artists and stardoms, whilst highlighting the talent Africa has to offer on a global scale. Wow. Welcome, Priscilla, and thank you so much for being here. It must be, when you guys hear this back, doesn't it remind you of all the amazing things that you've done? Like, wow, that's me. Wow. I'm just reading this and being empowered, like, wow, I need to step my game up, but we'll get there. Moving on to Michael Boateng, a former Great Manchester police officer, became a household name in the winter of 2020 in season 6 of the ITV's hit show, Love Island. Since leaving the show, Michael continues to be a great role model in the Black community, using his platform to uplift and inspire his followers and to speak out on important issues, including advocacy around Black Lives Matter. Welcome, Michael, and thank you for joining us. Sharon, wow. Sharon has been in private practice since 2007 and has been a counsellor and psychotherapist since 2005. Her therapeutic approach is a person-centered, but also works within the models of psychodynamic and CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Sharon's extensive experience covers a number of themes, including, but not limited to, domestic abuse, low self-esteem, survivors and victims of narcissist abuse, young people between the ages of 14 to 25 years, PTSD, loss and bereavement, attachment and identity issues, addiction issues, anger issues, and therapeutic work with inner child. So again, such extensive experience. And last, but obviously by no means least, Sinead George. who is a therapist and clinical director of Culture Minds Therapy Platform and Directory Service, helping people from the Black and Asian community find a therapist. Sinead is best known for her online series In Conversation With and Keeping Up With, whereby she interviews public figures who share their personal mental health stories and how they're coping during COVID to end the stigma and people suffering in silence. Wow. Welcome everybody, and thank you again for being here. So how are we all doing this morning? Are we good?
Good.
Yeah, we're all good. I'm good.
Amazing. So I'm just going to get right into it because obviously we've only got a certain amount of time, and this is such an amazing question that I've really wanted to ask, but I'm going to give us some context first of all. I know in America, a lot of terms that are being flying around at the moment is like intersectionality and stuff like that. So I'm just going to give an overview of what intersectionality sort of is, and then I'm just going to go straight into asking you guys some good questions. So when I was looking at intersectionality, I was looking at how we face quite a lot of challenges in terms of accessibility, economic and educational opportunities. And there's a lot of societal stigmas and especially a lot of gender bias as well, which obviously I've personally experienced. So the term intersectionality was first coined by Kemball Crenshaw, and it's the overlap of social groups and categorizations that include race, gender, and social class as it relates to systems of oppression. And I just want to ask, before I even continue, who out of us has experienced this level where there's such intersectionality of what's happening? It's hard to just break away from one thing because the variables are so much. I'm going to ask you, Sharon, how in your practice have you seen these overlap, and what does it mean for some of your clients?
I think like you were saying, Vashti, that sort of interlapping of what happens in society, what's expected of people in society, and what we inside ourselves believe to be the truth. Sometimes that intersection can be quite confusing because we're expected to behave and be a certain way, and then sometimes we often want to behave the way that we want to behave. So I think it confuses who we are and who we want to be sometimes in society.
And Sinead, what would you say in terms of that as well?
Yeah, I would say I totally agree with what Sharon says. You know, we have to compromise both how we behave based on how society treats us, and sometimes it could be quite conflicting, and then we can then second guess ourselves, and it could be quite challenging for how we express ourselves in the world today.
Do you find that it's quite a heavy burden for people to sort of navigate that, or do you find that there are like quite easy tools that people can and resources that people can access in order for them to sort of navigate this, essentially these variables that are at work with what's going on? Either Sharon or Sinead.
Well, I think it depends, because I think the tools are there, but it's how people can access them, and sometimes people don't know how to access the tools that maybe are out there, the information that maybe is out there. Sometimes it isn't advertised in a way that feels accessible to a lot of people, particularly people in our communities as well. The information that's out there, is that for me? Is that not for me? So yeah, the tools can be there. It depends on you as a person and how far you're prepared to go out there and get hold of the tools, I think.
Interesting. So I guess for us, intersectionality is not just about belonging to one particular group. It's about how we navigate the variable groups that we belong to and how they sort of merge together, essentially. So, looking at 2020, it shone a light on issues of mental health within the Black community, obviously from coronavirus to George Floyd, and from the Black barrister being mistaken as a defendant to the rise in access to therapy. So when we talk about Black Minds Matter, what is the first thing that comes to mind? I'm going to ask Priscilla and Mike. What do you think about when you hear the term Black Minds Matter? As he might look into Priscilla. What about yourself, Mike?
Ladies first, but when I hear Black Lives Matter, for me, it's more. It kind of incorporates everything. So when we go to work, when we're at home, basically our day-to-day life. So in everything that we do, I don't think it's more so Black Minds Matter, just Black Minds Matter, just a statement, but it's more how we live and how we want to be able to work basically and just be free in everything that we do. So for me, that's what Black Lives Matter means.
Right. And yourself, Priscilla?
I would agree with Mike. So it's just about having peace, I would say. That's what Black Minds Matter. It's about going to a working environment, feeling comfortable, being in a social situation and feeling comfortable and free. It's about not having to worry about prejudice. It's also about not having to worry about just your mental state or your mind frame, because I feel like, especially in COVID, people have enough things to worry about, and then you have to worry about your race on top of it. Mm-hmm. So it's just about being mentally free. If you want to be happy, be happy, be sad, be to yourself or act however you want, you have that freedom to do so.
Mm-hmm. But do you feel we do have that freedom to do so? Because I know when we're in certain environments, sometimes we don't necessarily have that sort of freedom. I'm going to ask Adjani, even in creating your series Dreaming Whilst Black, do you feel like you had the creative freedom to actually portray the stories in the way that you wanted to?
For myself, I feel like it was slightly different because, one, it was independently funded, but two, I grew up in a Black country.
Right.
Which I do think changes at least for me, you see the difference in the psychological mindset, even myself and my cousins who I live with here. So I didn't necessarily grow up with the consistent overt racism, you understand? So even like when I came here to study architecture, I remember my little cousin being surprised, like, "Rah, like, man studying architecture," and that being like a thing, whereas everybody in every layer of every government and business, including Forbes list in Jamaica, is Black. So I guess for me coming here to make Dreaming Whilst Black and decide to make a show that I'm gonna say, you know what, actually I'm gonna talk about racism, I'm gonna tell white people about themselves. I didn't grow up with feeling the weight of racism. So I could just tell it and not care, and whatever happened. So I do think for me, it's slightly different because I didn't grow up with that constant, that barrier.
How does it compare to your time here in the UK now?
It's funny because I feel like that's a struggle of many, I guess, understanding Black people here when immigrants come here, because it's not Black people. Like, you hear enough people from the Caribbean that say, "Man, why you don't just work hard?" And it's like, work hard. They don't know. They don't know what it's like to be here. And being here, I understand why people feel like they need to conform, or why people need, like, I've been in the industry long enough now to understand, like, sometimes your check is at stake, and you gotta choose your rent. Enough people choose them rent over them moral compass, because moral compass don't pay bills. So I get it.
Yeah. So thinking about the taboos around speaking to somebody, obviously we've explained that, it can be very difficult. The variables are very hard to juggle. Do we find that, well, I believe that there is a taboo in the Black community with regards to speaking to a therapist or speaking to someone or a counsellor. Shanae, would you say that you find that with your clients, or what would you say about that? So the first question is there a taboo? And if so, how have you found that?
I think that there is a taboo, and I think there's a taboo for various different reasons. So racism can be an underlying factor based on the taboo, but I also think that there's more underlying concerns, and I feel that a lot of the time people within the Black and Asian community, we can be quite fearful of judgment, particularly with, you know, the life that we live in the UK and how we've been oppressed, and when we experience racism, and when we experience, you know, being able to not act as ourselves and as we would, like Adjani said, because of a check. All of these factors can come into play when it comes to seeking a therapist. There's a lot of stigma when it comes to mental health also, and I find that people within the Black and Asian community, they may not seek a therapist because they feel that, okay, what if this may affect my living? What if this may affect my job? What if people call me mad? What if people call me crazy? So there's many different reasons and situations as to why there's such a taboo when it comes to mental health and people seeking help.
Mm-hmm. Priscilla and Mike, would you say that there are sort of cultural reasons as well behind there being taboos? I mean, I'm from Jamaican heritage, and, you know, we don't really talk to people about our business, and we try to keep it in-house. How would you say the impact of your cultural makeup has had on, say, the taboos about speaking to someone?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned being Jamaican and not to speak in your business, because it's very much the same for me. I'm Ghanaian. So in most Ghanaian households, we're very much taught to kind of keep ourselves to ourselves. Don't let the outside world know about your business. And I feel like there's a lot of people who are the same way. So rather than wanting to express themselves and tell the world exactly how they're feeling and speaking to other people, it's more so, should I not? And a lot of people actually think that way, which is, it's kind of an issue.
Yeah. And I think it also goes down to, like, generally our upbringing and what we witness. Because me personally, I grew up with my single mother, and I just always saw her. She just got the job done. She wouldn't talk too much. She wouldn't say nothing. No matter whatever she was going through, she just got the job done. So we kind of inherit this independent, get it done. If there's a problem, you'll sort it and you keep moving. So I think that also affects us as well and makes us think we don't need to talk to someone, I can handle it myself. So then that also ripples down to maybe trying to seek a therapist. You're like, no, I'm not going to seek a therapist. I can sort this situation myself.
Yeah. Interesting. So Sharon, I'm going to ask, have you seen an increase in therapy over the last sort of, say, 6 months? And do you think that people are now becoming more open to actually understanding that I actually need some extra support?
Well, yeah, I think I have. I mean, particularly with COVID, and, you know, there's been a lot of families that have lost people, and sickness and illness. So the pandemic itself has kind of given that opportunity to people who want to seek therapy. But yes, I think some of what Priscilla and Mike and Sinead were saying about those cultural attitudes, those ingrained family values that we all have, you know, encompasses that sort of sense of shame and that sense of pride as well, alongside, well, you know, like you said, we don't go out there and tell people our business. You know, it's, and some of that might also be a little bit of ignorance, but I think what's happening now, the fact that mental health and talking and having the opportunity to really just be in a space that is non-judgmental, is very, very empathic, is, you know, I hear a lot of people say, oh, but they're going to judge me, they're going to point their finger at me. Well, actually, that's not the case. And I think, yes, over the past 6 months or so, coupled with what's been happening in our Black communities across the world, I think it's given more opportunity for people to think about it, even if they haven't gone forward. Think about, actually, you know, some of those things have really affected me, and some of those things I'd really like to talk about, and some of those things I'd really like to be able to get off of my chest, for that matter. So yes, I think society, for some reason, has shifted that post a little bit. I think there's still work to be done in our communities, but I think it's shifted a little bit, and obviously opportunities like this for people to hear it, you know, might just mean that somebody somewhere along the line thinks, you know, that's something that some of that I could probably do with. So more of this is probably necessary, more of those testimonies that people are saying. But I think, you know, again, in our communities, it means that we hear it from someone else, or we might hear someone else's experience, which might just make us not want to experience that. So we tend to hear it and believe it. And sometimes we have to experience it ourselves, I think.
Mm-hmm. In terms of like, so looking at the working environment, I know that you were saying that there has been quite a bit of a shift. And I know that all of us in our own ways, we kind of, we have autonomy over our working situation, but I'm assuming that we've all worked for different corporations as well before we came to a situation where we are all working for ourselves. It's actually great for me to be able to say that we're all working for ourselves. So, which I guess about maybe 5-6 years ago probably wouldn't have been the case. And even that in itself is very interesting. But I'll get back to that in a minute, because I think that's the follow-up from how we feel in a working environment and how our experiences or our lived experiences has contributed to maybe, I would use the term for myself, being muted when I bring certain things to the table or bring my lived experience to the table. Do you feel, I'm going to ask Adjani this first, do you feel that you have to, let's think about in terms of organizations and corporations as opposed to working for yourself. Do you feel that you've had to like code switch or adapt to certain things that maybe made you feel uncomfortable, but was in a way less uncomfortable for other people? Do you feel like you've had to do that? Or?
Yeah, no, for sure. So like when I first came over, even when I just came out to go uni, and it was weird because like I went to one of the best colleges in Jamaica, so I kind of came here on a hype thing of like, yo, man, the baddest thing on this. And every presentation, they'd be like, could you repeat yourself, please? Oh, sorry, what was that? Like, and it's almost like, yo, I'm speaking English, but for some reason this can't translate for you, you know what I mean? Which I found interesting when I heard Irish people speak. And I'm like, yo, so how you understand them? Like, you know what I mean? But you can't understand me. So a lot of the time, like even again, going into film school, like changing and going into film school, there was a lot of like, this is the industry. This is the way. And obviously that way have nothing to do with even me. Like, even I remember even being in a meeting of like where a guy was like, oh, you know, when I have a meeting with someone, I'm asking them to buy wine. And depending on the wine they buy, I decide if I could work with them or not. And I was thinking, yo, I never drink wine, dog. And just simple things like that, and having to like mold and adapt and like learn a British accent and learn a particular type of British accent, because my cousin them accent when we live within a Tottenham, now I really work with the people who may I try work with this as well. And I guess for a while I did that until, I don't know, I guess I started being labeled as a British filmmaker, and I kind of just get vexed and decide to say, yo, no, I'm gonna switch again. So, wow. But I understand it, because when I look in the industry, when I hear the prominent Black people in my industry, they sound the same. They have the same mannerisms and yet do similar practices as the predominantly white people who run the industry. So I understand. And yeah, I've bought into it for years. But
you're saying now that you've actually separated yourself from that and you're...
Yeah, no, I'm in a business. Because I feel like our assumption, like, it's like there's this thing with Nikki Giovanni, and she says in order for us to change, our assumptions have to change. Mm-hmm. So I kind of just go with the same arrogance of when I came here, of being like, I'm in a business, this is how I'm going to do it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, well, we'll see if it works.
So to Sinead, and then I'm going to ask Priscilla and Michael afterwards, what do you think the impact is of racism in the workplace, and how do you think people should be able to navigate it? I'll go to Sinead first.
I think that's a really good question. The impact on racism, I think it affects people more on a subconscious level. So sometimes people may not even realise that, you know, someone is being racist to them until they actually either speak to someone or sit back and think, did that person say something racial to me? So sometimes you may understand it at the forefront, but you may not understand it. And I like to use myself as an example. I remember on my training, I was working in a hospital, and I must have said I wanted to become a clinical psychologist to a white nurse. And then the nurse said to me, oh, that's a white middle class job. You can't get that job. And at the time, I was young and I'd never really understood what she was saying, but it stayed with me for a long time. And only now, reflecting back, I could think, hold on a minute, that was unacceptable. And, you know, I never said anything. So it affected me more on a subconscious level. And so as I was training, as I was going within the mental health career field, I noticed that subconsciously I was doubting myself and thinking, can I really become a psychologist? Because this nurse just told me it's a white middle class job. On top of that, seeing as I was on training, I'm hardly seeing any black psychologists. If I do, I can count them on a handful. It's kind of like, hold on a minute, you know, is this going to be a career path that I can actually attain and actually achieve? So I do think it definitely has an effect on us subconsciously.
Wow. And Mike and Priscilla, got to be honest with you, I don't watch Love Island or anything like that. I'm sorry, I don't watch terrestrial TV, if that you know helps. But how would you say that it had an impact in terms of your time in Love Island, and what were the repercussions, if any, when you came out?
I would say first and foremost, I feel like it had a huge impact on the way I was portrayed. You not watching it yourself, or for people that did watch it, most of my time that I was actually aired on the screen was when I was having a confrontation with Mike. So, but the way I communicate and the way we communicate, we actually had conversations, we actually talked. However, they wanted me to play into the black girl narrative. They wanted me to scream and shout at him and lose my cool, but that's just not what I am. So luckily for me, that actually worked in my favor, because it was just like, wow, she's representing well, she's doing good, they're actually having a conversation. But apart from that, it was so easy for them to tear down my character, and they could have done it in a second if I didn't know who I was, if I hadn't been raised the way I was raised. And I thought on top of that as well, it's just about airtime. I don't believe us as a couple, we actually got the deserving time we were shown. And I feel like in social media, you will see that I had less followers than a lot of people. I wasn't verified until we started this Black Lives Matter movement. So it's very obvious. And I think coming out as well, I saw the difference in how my other counterparts were being treated, in how opportunities were, and just things like that. And that's when I realized, wow, I actually genuinely do have to work twice as hard. I didn't see this before, because I operated in the Black community. I was in Afrobeats music and we were thriving and empowering. But when I came out, I was like, this is a whole different world, and I have to change my strategy just so that I can fit in.
Yeah, and even just to add on to what Priscilla said as well, I feel like the impact of racism, especially being in Love Island and being on the show, it affects the atmosphere, because I don't have that mental strain. I'm thinking about it, but because obviously, like I said before, it's not.
Sorry about that.
It's not all the time that I want to talk about it and say so and so said this or this has happened. I'm uncomfortable, because I don't want to express myself on that level. I then don't speak, and then that subsequently affects how I engage with other people, and they don't know why there's friction. I know why there's friction, but because I'm not saying it, nobody's able to kind of understand each other, and it just creates like an uneasy atmosphere in the workplace where there shouldn't really be. And then that, for me, that's just like a direct result of how we're being treated, or how I'm being treated inside a working environment. But because you don't understand what you're doing, and I don't really want to tell you, then it just becomes a problem that even transpires to outside when we come out the villa, and then everything that we see.
And I think emotional intelligence also plays a part to it. A lot of people, they're oblivious to how they're even treating others, and they kind of almost look at you as in, why are you behaving like this? Or why do you have that opinion? So sometimes that makes you doubt yourself on top of it. Am I overreacting? If I say something, am I overreacting? So it all plays a part.
But with Mike, you said that, you know, sometimes you don't want to say anything to anyone. Why wouldn't you say, like, what are the barriers to you saying something to sort of clear something up? Why would you not take that opportunity?
Well, it's kind of, so for me, if I was to look at even my time in the police and, you know, just being in that kind of environment, it was very much a case of they want you to conform to how everything has been for years. And in the police, there was very much a mentality of our way is the only way. So
Yeah.
how we've been is how we're going to be, and we're not really going to change. And I just feel like in order for you to progress, sometimes you feel mentally like you have to just conform to how it is. And even in the media industry and coming into national television, I also felt that same way, having that mentality from the police. Felt like, okay, in order for me to progress, maybe I shouldn't cause any problems for anybody. Maybe I shouldn't raise certain issues. I even remember there was something that happened in the villa, which it affected me a lot. It bothered me because for me, it was out and out racism, which I didn't raise and I didn't mention, purely because I didn't want it to have that effect on me whereby I can't then progress in the show because I've created an issue for people. So I was more inclined to just keep myself to myself. And I never actually told anybody that it happened. I rather wanted to see how they dealt with it,
right?
Which obviously nobody even knows it happened. So that's how they dealt with it. So those are the kind of things those kind of situations that we're in. And that's why I act the way I act.
Wow. So Sharon, I'm going to ask you, what should senior leaders and organizations, maybe in and outside of the NHS, do to create safer spaces for Black colleagues? I mean, you know, hearing what Mike is saying, and that nobody even really noticed when a situation that really affected him happened. What should we be asking from our employers and from our organizations? What kind of things should they be doing?
Is that for me?
Yes, Sharon, sorry.
Sorry, yeah. I think there's a real sense of wanting to be aware. So having awareness, but also being able to have to kind of have that level of understanding. You know, and like Mike said, he didn't actually want to say what had gone on. And I want, you know, why? What was the environment like? What actually was going on there, which made you feel that you really couldn't say how you really felt? And I think in those working environments, it's difficult because hierarchy, depending on who they are, don't actually allow for those spaces to happen. And I think, you know, having somewhere in an organization that you feel safe to be able to do that, because I think the safety aspect around, you know, losing your job, you know, being smear campaigned across media, you know, being kind of turned into something that you're not. I think it does more happen to people from our communities who sit at those kind of hierarchy levels. So I think in those institutions, those working environments, there really needs to be a change of attitude, but there really also needs to be an opportunity to learn about awareness and be okay with that. Because, you know, the fear and the stigma around, you know, someone like Adjani having a go at them, you know, they don't understand, and they couldn't understand where he might be coming from and why he might be using that tone. There's usually a stereotype that's given to all of us. So I think in those, you know, NHS, all those institutional environments, they need to be open, I think, to awareness. And that might be uncomfortable. You know, a lot of the time it is uncomfortable. Even for us, it's uncomfortable. But I think that being able to just take that deep breath and hear it and listen to it, you might be able to do something about it, but you wouldn't be able to if you don't hear it and you don't allow yourself to listen to it. So I think, you know, given that chance, you know, there could be lots to be learned from, you know, each one of us can learn from each one of us. So really important to be open to awareness and open to being able to listen and to hear what people have to say.
Charlotte, I'm going to ask you, how do we have these uncomfortable conversations? How do we even put that out there, and start this? Because as Sharon said, it is uncomfortable for us. I mean, I've been in a few situations where I just want to be heard. I just want someone to listen to me, but I'm seen as, you know, as Mike said, the troublemaker, or, you know, the person who's making an issue, when actually my lived experience is not taken into account. So how do we actually have these uncomfortable conversations?
A quote that's come to my mind with that question is, sometimes in life we have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And if a conversation is hard to have, then that may mean that it's a conversation that's needed to have, despite how uncomfortable it may make you feel. And sometimes I feel that we need to sometimes find that strength within us, because we all have strength. But what it is we doubt ourselves. We can doubt ourselves depending on our environment. So with what Mike was saying, how he never reported what happened, it may have been a thing where he wanted to, he felt strong to, but he kind of maybe doubted himself based on his environment and held back and thought, you know what, because of the environment that I'm in, I'm going to hold back and I'm not going to say anything. But it's all about getting uncomfortable and finding that inner voice that you know you have, you know, because essentially your mind would probably tell you go and do it, but then your heart was like, oh no. So you're kind of led more by your emotions more than by your thought processing. So I would say it's just about being strong within yourself and knowing that you have that strength and that confidence to speak about something, because after, you will notice you feel much better having spoken about something that's been meaningful to yourself.
Mm-hmm. I guess one of the things that we'll probably be thinking about is obviously the repercussions. And as we saw, you know, from John Boyega, he made it very clear that he wasn't interested in the repercussions of what was going to come after he, you know, said his piece and his voice was heard. And I think that is definitely something that that weighs heavy on us, as if I speak up or if I say something, what's going to happen afterwards? You know, how is this going to impact me, or how is this going to affect me? I think all of us are in, I don't know if privileged is the right term to use, but we're all in a little bit of a different space, primarily because we have autonomy over how we work. But there's a number of obviously other people who don't have that sort of you know, autonomy. And I know for myself, if I'm going to say something, it's not really going to affect my business too much outside of NHS. Maybe inside of NHS it might do, because of my role within the NHS. And if there are things that I see I would like to add my voice to, then yeah, there potentially is some repercussions that I have to weigh up before I say anything. I'm going to ask you, Adjani, do you think when you're engaging with like health services, you know, if you've engaged in like maybe therapy or anything like that, do you think it's important to have a lived experience when providing adequate care?
Meaning for the person who's giving care to me to have lived experience?
Yes.
I mean, to be honest, I just feel like there needs to be a level of understanding. Mm-hmm. And I guess lived experience comes with, or I would assume, comes with a certain level of understanding. You know what I mean? So it's like funny enough, like I have a friend of mine who has a therapist, and I remember she was saying, oh, yo, yeah, a therapist is a white man. And I was like, wow, that's mad. And she's like, nah, like, you know, therapy is therapy, and, you know, studying is studying, blah, 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 blah. 2 no Black Lives Matter happened, and we're chatting, like, after that. And I was like, yo, how therapy going? I should say, yo, she had him fall out because man couldn't really hack the Black Lives Matter thing. You know what I'm saying? And it's not to say that being Black gives you an inherent understanding, because that is also not true.
Right.
But I do think that, I guess for me as a filmmaker, having certain amount of lived experience gives me a certain back or like knowledge pool to draw from personally when telling stories. So I imagine that the same transfers for therapy or whoever, where if they've gone through something and have had to work through it, then I guess it's a more inherent, like a deeper understanding, a personal understanding of what the person is going through versus an academic or, you know, intellectual understanding.
I'm going to just let our participants know that we are going to go to questions in about 3 or 4 minutes. So if you want to put some questions up, you can do, and I'll be referring them to the panel. I'm going to just ask this question and anybody can answer. So thinking about the organizations that don't have the same makeup as us, can they support colleagues in the absence of lived experience? Obviously, we just spoke about the lived experience being helpful to obviously what we're trying to get that level of understanding across. But in the absence of the lived experience and colleagues who don't have the same makeup, ethnic makeup, how can they support us with some of the things that we may be experiencing at work? I'll ask Priscilla, and then anybody else can sort of chime in.
I think what needs to happen, or what could potentially happen, because I used to work in a bank, so there's very much a structure there in place. But I think a lot of the time people want you to share your story, but it goes much deeper than sharing your story. It's what's the next action? What's the steps that you're actually going to put into place? Because we've shared stories, we've shared so many stories, and nothing comes from it. So it's about listening, it's about taking it into account, and also coming up with the action in what's going to happen. And also having a representation, because it's all good and well for us to talk to people who don't look like us, but how will they understand? Mm-hmm. Or will it even go into their ears? Are they listening or are they hearing? So I think it's about having representation and actually following up with the action, to come back up with it. So that's just for me.
Do you feel that there's a lot of judgment when our stories are shared? I mean, sometimes I know that I may just have an opinion, and it's like, you know, I'm being prejudged for my opinion, even though it's just my opinion, you know, or I can't have a conversation with someone in leadership unless we're talking about race, when actually I've got lots of other ideas about maybe, you know, the structure or the principles or procedures, or, you know, but it's like my voice is only attributed to the race situations, and then I'm judged by that as well.
Yeah.
How should they be sort of like supporting us with opening conversations?
I'm glad you actually said that, because whilst I was working in the bank, I was told, what was I told? I was told I was too confrontational, or I was told that sometimes once the information is given to you, just accept it and take it. But I was also always taught by my mum, if you're confused about something, or if you have something to say, bring it up. But with me, the leadership came to me and was just like, yeah, a lot of the management team was saying, you're always giving pushback, as they would like to say it. But I was like, I'm just expressing my opinion and expressing how things should be seen from a different point of view. So what I'd like to say is, if it's coming from, well, when anyone's ever having a conversation or giving their opinion, people should take it as it's feedback. It's not attacking. It's not people are coming for your spot, because I feel like a lot of the time with the leadership team, they feel as if you're attacking them or you're undermining them. So I feel like they need to have more of an open mind in the way that they accept the information and receive the information. And I think that this comes down to training as well, because a lot of leaders, they go through the motion of, it's my way, this is what I'm saying, I have to make decisions, I have to make the rules, I have to run this business. However, it takes the whole infrastructure to run the business. It takes the employees that are beneath you, because they're actually the ones that are getting the work done and can actually improve the work environment. So I think it literally just comes down to listening and having more of a open mind.
Amazing. Sharon, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely with all the above. And I think, you know, like you said, that opportunity for you to be able to be yourself in your working environment, actually there's opportunities to learn, for others to learn from that, because, you know, our approach might come in a slightly different way from how it would come from our, you know, white colleague for that matter. But we might be saying the same thing, but we might be saying it with a little bit more passion and a little bit more backstory for that matter. And yes, it's important to not then add the stigma to that, and to be able to have a level of real understanding and be open to that. I think, you know, people's attitudes and people's way of perception, I think that says a lot. That really sets barriers for people to be able to just be a bit more fluid with how that person is. Because as communities, we're very passionate people. We speak sometimes our minds in terms of how we feel and what we say. Sometimes it's taken and it's celebrated, and sometimes it's not. And I think we need to be able to feel as though we can be passionate with what it is we feel, why we feel it, and somewhat have a dialogue around, okay, I can understand why you might see that. That person may not see it in the same way, but there's a dialogue that allows that person to be able to step into your shoes, or you be able to step into their shoes. And I think, you know, society somehow, because of, you know, society how it is, doesn't allow us to kind of be able to have that fluidity sometimes. I think the barriers are somewhat set. And because they are, it's those who try to move those barriers that then, you know, they are on the spotlight almost. But it shouldn't stop us, because I think there's so much learning to be had from who we are, what we have to offer as people, and as a very intelligent group of people as well. I think it's so important for those barriers sometimes to come down, but institutionally and hierarchically, that there's a lot of learning, and like Priscilla said, there's a lot of teaching, and you know, if they're prepared, if people are prepared to hear, then yeah, there could be so much barriers that could be just moved out of the way, and that fluidity would just grow from that point onwards.
We've got a couple of questions here now, and so I'm going to ask maybe 2 or 3, if we might have time for 3. So one of the questions that was raised here is about school and how important it is to have both Black teachers and teachers who understand their own biases. And funny enough, that's a very interesting question, because I remember the names of all my Black teachers at school. I don't remember the names of everyone else, and maybe that's my own bias coming in. But Sinead, how important is it to have both Black teachers and teachers who understand their own biases, and what sort of impacts can that have if that is not the case?
I think it's important to have both races, all races, within the schooling industry, because it's all about cultural competence, and it's all about being able to understand your students and understand where they're coming from on various different levels. Because like you said, you only remember your Black teachers as opposed to the other teachers that you had. So that then shows that you had more of a connection with the teachers who looked like you and could understand you on that type of level. And I totally agree with yourself as well. I remember more of my Black teachers than I did the other teachers. So it's just all about coming together and just acknowledging each other and acknowledging other races, and, you know, for it to be everyone as a community being accepted for who they are and being in the industry, in the teaching industry, working in the schools.
Wow, we're getting loads of different questions now. Maybe I should have opened it out beforehand. We've got a question for Priscilla and Mike. It says that you mentioned life after Love Island. How did you deal with the negative media content? And, oops, jeez. Sorry, lots of questions have just come in, so I'm not even sure. How did you deal with the negative media content? And did you ensure, how did you ensure you had the same opportunities as the other contestants? I think that's like leaving. How did you deal with the negative comments, first of all, or the negative media?
I had to first of all just kind of swallow my pride and admit that I need to speak to someone first. So I definitely spoke to my family, I spoke to my friends, and then I sought help as well. So I spoke to the external resources that they had for me, and I let them know how I was feeling, because I was getting a lot of backlash after the show, which I felt like if I didn't speak to anyone about, then it would have affected me mentally without a doubt, because there was a lot to deal with, especially coming from a background whereby I'm not used to the media, I'm not used to public scrutiny like that, to that extent. So it was important for me to speak to people and just seek advice from people who have also been in a similar situation. So that's how I dealt with it personally.
In terms of me, fortunately, I didn't get, I hardly got any backlash at all. So I'll just be focusing more on the opportunities. How did I ensure I got my opportunities? What I realized quick is that if I sit and waited around, nothing was going to come to me. People were not knocking at the door. They weren't checking for me. They didn't want this. They didn't want me. So what I had to do is I had to go to the brands. I had to tell them, this is what I can do. This is what I'm capable of. This is what I have done. And that's when the light shined on me. So I'll be like, oh, okay. Now they thought of me. Now they're thinking about me. Now they want to use me. Oh my gosh, this is a great idea. Why didn't we use it? And that's just because usually we're not a thought. We're second thought. We have to plant the seeds into their head. So I learned that quick, and that's the only way. I had to create the opportunities for myself. I had to knock down the doors for myself.
Yeah, and that's very much the same for me as well.
Yeah.
We had to actively go out and show people our real personalities rather than the edited personalities, and what we can do as people and what we bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's basically how we then managed to create the opportunity for people to then approach us and be like, oh, okay, we like Mike, we like how you are as a person. So I want to present this, and then open up more conversations about how we can progress.
Yeah.
And that's basically how we did it.
And there's something to be said about the way in which we are perceived when you don't know us as people. I'm sure that people perceive me in a number of different ways based on conversations that I've had with other people, not necessarily with them directly. And I think that it is definitely something that we should be encouraging people to do more. Come and have a conversation with me, talk to me, let's chop it up, let's see how we are, and not everybody's personalities are gonna match, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be conflict just because we don't necessarily agree. I'm gonna ask another question, Adjani. I've been asked here, what are your views on employing the best person for a role in the organization, even if that person is non-Black?
What are my views on hiring the best person?
Yeah.
I don't see why you shouldn't hire the best person. Yeah, I would.
Let's put it into a context. If there was like a diversity and inclusion role, or something to do with, inclusivity, hiring, what are your views on possibly hiring a white person for that role?
So here's what I think people misconstrue in terms of hiring, and in terms of things like positive discrimination and filling quotas and all of that kind of stuff, affirmative action and all those things. I think a lot of people look on it as, oh, white people are missing out, or this Black person is less qualified, when actually the issue may be this Black person is actually more qualified, but hasn't given the opportunity to show their skill or show their value. Or even in terms of hiring the best person actually never fits all the requirements. Mm-hmm. Because if I apply for your job and me have 5 years experience, management, blah, 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 I'm there for 6 months, bro. Like, I'm not staying, because I'm gonna get bored. Whereas if it's a person who, okay, I have experience, but I haven't done X, Y, and Z, I'm more inclined to stay because I'm learning and I'm growing. So even this context of hiring the best person, I would argue, how do you qualify what best is, and through whose lens are you seeing best? Because if it's just on a more corporate level, if we're talking about catchment areas in England where you go to the high school based on where you live, no, because my cousin grew up in Tottenham and go to high school in Tottenham, does that mean he's not as good as the person who may have grown up in Westminster area and went to that high school there? Like, what is good? And I feel like we need to really reevaluate what good or what qualification is, so that we can then actually evaluate who the best person is.
Wow, excellent. I'm going to end with this question. I'm going to start with yourself, Sinead, and then everyone else. We've got like about 4 minutes left. So if someone has experienced racism or been, you know, the victim of racism, what would you say are the best tips to take care of themselves and their mental health? I know we've all shared various experiences that we've had, and unfortunately, you know, there possibly will be more instances. I know that a lot has been happening over the last couple of months with us coming together and trying to support each other through different you know, experiences that we're having. But what are some of the best ways to take care of ourselves and our mental health moving forward?
I think that's a good question. It's a nice question to end with. I think talking to family and friends, people who have maybe experienced racism themselves, because what I find is that when you speak to someone, you may not know that they've experienced racism, and they may say, yeah, I experienced racism, and, you know, it will start a conversation. So, you know, speak to someone who is trusted, someone who you can trust, who you can confide in, and just have some open conversations about things. And you may find that they may have coped in a different way compared to you, and you can learn from them and kind of so forth. Alternatively, if you are struggling and you find that there's no one who you can speak to who's a trusted person, then I would encourage seeking out to find a therapist or find some support to help you if you're struggling with your mental well-being as a result of racism. For myself, you mentioned I'm the clinical director of a therapist directory service. So we have a bunch of therapists from the Black and Asian culture who are qualified and who are professionals within their skill set, who can help clients who are struggling with racial trauma, who can't speak to other people and feel confident. So I would just say communicate with people and get ideas and share your experiences, but also seek help if you're unable to communicate with other people, because I think with racism, it's a shared experience, and everyone has their own individual experience based on what they've struggled with as a result of racism. And you can learn things from other people, and it's all about learning and, you know, being part of a wider community.
Amazing. I mean, I think it's so important to understand that we are not alone and that there are people who have had similar experiences. And I think sometimes, especially with isolation, we feel like I'm the only person going through this. No one else may understand me, but I think what you're saying is quite key there. So we've got 2 minutes left, guys. Where can people find you? So Sharon, if people wanted to get in contact with you, or they wanted to continue the conversation, where could they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. They can contact me there. I don't have my Facebook page set up yet, but if there are people that want to, I don't know whether they can directly make contact with the Vashti or the organizers, then I can get my details to them. But I can be found on LinkedIn. People can leave me messages there.
Great. And Sinead, yourself, where can people find you?
I can be found on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn name is Sinead George, or I can be found on Instagram. My Instagram name is Therapy with Shah. So either or.
Amazing. And Shah, S-H-A-R?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Priscilla and Mike, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram. It's just Priscilla Anyabu _.
And same, you can find me on Instagram as well, Michael Boateng01, or you can find me on Twitter, Michael Boateng _.
Amazing. And Adjani?
Yeah, no, sorry. But as I say, I'm like, yo, this is how you pronounce it. Name this Boateng. So I'm on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram is s.adjani and Twitter is the Adjani. But yeah.
Amazing. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciated it. We've had an amazing conversation. It would be great to continue this somehow. So, you know, watch this space. We're not really sure how that would look. But again, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining in the conversation. Thank you to all of our attendees and our participants, and thank you all for your amazing questions. And that's it from us. So hopefully make sure that you have a look at all of the other Black History Month activations that we've got going on. And again, I just want to say thank you to Melissa Thermador and Zishan Ashgar for this opportunity. So take care. Bye-bye.